Well, hello, White Sox fans. Welcome to another edition of FutureSox pod/stream. My name is Ian Eskridge. I'm here live with James Fox. How you doing, James?
Hey, Ian, what's up, man? This is awesome.
Yeah, not a whole lot, bunch of stuff for, a bunch of little things for White Sox, not really necessarily, important to operations per se. One signing that's, some people are up at arms about it, but what aren't people up at arms about at this point? There's a bunch of stuff to talk about. How are you?
Yeah, no, I mean John Brebbia, right? Is that how you say his name? I
Yep.
mean, it's just like it's fine. It's $5.5 million, $4 million this year, and then he gets the buyout or he either stays. I don't mind those types of reliever signings, right? Like I've bemoaned all the ones in the past where you're giving $30 million to a setup guy or a seventh inning guy. Like if you just take a bunch of flyers like this, you're more likely to, you know, get your money's worth, and then who knows, like maybe this is a guy that you trade at the deadline, right? So yeah, there's I don't really like think that there's bad 1 year deals, but on the other hand, like we're used to seeing Kenny Williams spend 30 million on five bad players instead of signing like one good one. So I do kind of understand like a little bit like some of the frustration.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the frustration that people have with the fact that it's another reliever, and that seems like all the White Sox ever seem to sign is relievers. But he is coming from San Fran, and what I like to call a Bob, a buddy of Bannister. And like the thing about him is that you look at his numbers and they don't stand out too much. He had a 3.99 ERA, but what if you look at his WHIP, he had a 1.174 WHIP. With the White Sox trying to build their defense, that is something that might translate well for him, and it might end up being a fairly decent signing. Plus, we also know they're going to have plenty of innings to fill.
Yeah, they are, and I think you see like he was listed as starting. He never really started. I think they used him as an opener a ton, right? So
Yeah.
look, I don't. Maybe it's something the White Sox are going to incorporate finally is like the use of openers. I mean, I do think looking at their starting rotation, obviously Cease is still in it for now, right? But there's a bunch of guys who might not go 6 or 7 innings every time, right? So like you could have a bullpen with quite a few like bulk guys, or at least like that could be the plan. So yeah, I mean, this is just it's another signing. I think some of their NRIs, like Joe Barlow, that guy's probably going to be in the bullpen, I would think, right? And then, I heard, Chris Getz kind of talked about Tim Hill and how he kind of had like a cleanup. He was hurt, and he's healthy, so I think they're expecting better things from him. So yeah, I mean, just some low cost flyers for veterans that have had some success in the past, and then you do still have some of your own guys who have been successful in the past, and Jimmy Lambert, Matt Foster, guys along those lines, to the point where hopefully, we're not seeing Jesse Schultens as much as, we have. And some of your prospects, I mean, like Jordan Leisure, I think could be a big part of this thing. I just don't think he will be at the beginning. I think they're going to make all these guys earn their way onto this team for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. I think Jordan Leisure in the Arizona Fall League pretty much looked unhittable. I think he had something like a strikeout rate, something around 50%, which is absolutely absurd. But yeah, I mean, I have no problem with them making these guys earn their way up to the major leagues. I mean, there should be nothing that's gifted. There should be nothing that should be assumed. You want to see just because of pedigree. I don't care at this point. Let's make sure that these guys have what it takes to make it up there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's what it'll kind of be like. And I think there's lots of like interesting starters. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's like a whole bunch of pitchers that like I kind of want to see, even though that we're not really expecting the team to be that good, right? I mean, we didn't talk much about the Rule 5 pick, Shane Drowan. He's a starting pitcher. He's in their top 30 pretty much everywhere. But I mean, I think that guy's probably in the bullpen too, I would imagine.
I
So,
mean,
there's
if they
just
want to keep him anyway.
a whole big pile of arms.
Yeah, and I'm perfectly fine with just stacking up all the pitching that we can because we know that there's going to be, I think the average for a major league team was somewhere around 11 for a starting the amount of starters that you'll need throughout a year, and with the club the way it is right now, it's probably going to be more than that because you're going to see some failure here. So,
Oh yeah, for sure. Like there's I mean, there's just like the whole big group of young guys, and then you have Michael Kopech, and you have the Garrett Crochet situation, and yeah, it's just it's pretty interesting. I will say, like for as much fungible space as they had on their 40-man roster, I think to start the season, I think it is getting a little tougher. Like if people are anticipating like a Cease trade where it's 3 or 4 guys added to the 40-man plus like a couple of big league signings. Like, there's really not that many expendable guys that you want to lose for nothing right now. I know, like, if I were to tweet that, people would be like, "Oh, who cares? Like, get rid of whoever," right? But I mean, even like your Lenin Sosas and Romy Gonzalez's and those types of guys, like, you don't want to just DFA and lose for nothing. So they do have to be a little bit strategic, I think, going forward.
yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. I mean, there are still like a couple of names that you look on there and you're kind of like, why is that guy in the 40 man? But it's starting to get a heck of a lot more slim now. It's going to be more difficult to find guys to just outright DFA to bring guys onto the 40 man. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, so I made a comment the other day, like, they signed Brebbia, but they haven't announced it yet, and I'm firmly on Alex Spee's watch right now, and
100%. Yeah.
one of my buddies is like, no, he's got a really good arm, keep him. I'm like, okay, Tuki
Sure.
Toussaint, Schultens. I mean, like I mean, because they haven't really done the like sign a pitcher, dump a position player thing, and if you look at the position player side, like there's really not that many more, like expendable guys unless, you bite the bullet on Gavin Sheets or something. Because he would be, probably next for me. So, but I don't know. We'll see. Because I am anticipating some more stuff. I mean, Chris Getz mentioned, they're looking in the outfield. I don't think they're right fielders on this roster. It could come via the Cease trade, but it could be a Joey Gallo or one of these guys that's just going to be forced to take a 1-year deal eventually here, And I know for a fact that the White Sox still have some sort of offer out for like one of your favorite players in Whit Merrifield. So, not that they'll get him. I just think that's, I don't love it either. But I short way of me saying like I don't think they're done. So looking at the roster is a little bit interesting because it's you're talking about getting rid of a player every time you add someone because you are right at 40.
Yeah. So Nick and Danny and myself, we had a stream slash pod, actually just a podcast that we recorded the other night about the news coming out from somebody, not exactly sure who, like where these sources are coming from, but the possibility of a proposed stadium at the 78 on the South Loop over there, over near Roosevelt and Clark. Now, we didn't have you in there, so I kind of want to get your take on this, and I want to kick it around a little bit with you. How you feeling about that location, the possibility of a new stadium, the probability that there won't be enough parking there to have tailgating? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean it does seem like tailgating might be the collateral damage, right? For like this whole thing, but all the other stuff that we've talked about for years, right? Where you're walking down the back steps or the ramps and you're like, wow, why doesn't the stadium face this way, right? Or you take somebody from out of town there for the first time and they're like, wait, I don't understand this, right? Like I think
Neither do we.
that's the biggest thing that it fixes. I think smaller stadium. I don't think it's going to be like one of the retro parks, that really have kind of gotten a bad rap like after the last like 25 years or so. People talk a lot about PNC. That's my favorite park. I think the biggest thing that people I guess should take away is like the White Sox want one of these ballpark villages. And if you've been to Cincinnati or St. Louis or Atlanta or any of these places, the Cubs kind of do, but like it's Wrigley Field, right? So like these places have all this stuff to do, right? Like they have sports books and they have bars and restaurants and there's condos and the team owns lots of it in most of these cases. The White Sox want that. My interpretation is, and after talking to some people today, they don't think that's feasible even if they wanted to stay in Bridgeport. It's just not a thing like that. The residents in that area, there are some older residents, and please feel free to like get in my DMs if this is false, right? But like it just seems like something like that is not going to get approved. Like if you wanted to, build a new stadium in the parking lots or something like across from where the current stadium is. So they are looking to move, and I think it's a really good location. I don't know what they need to dig out from underneath the ground or the parking structure or who's paying for it or any of that stuff. But I mean, the way Bruce Levine talked this past weekend on 670 The Score, he kind of made it seem like this thing is very likely to happen and that it could move quickly. And what's the name of the company that owns it's like Midwest
Yeah, Midwest
whatever you got?
Architecture or
Yeah,
something
so
like
you
that.
guys
Yeah.
talked about this. Yeah, so I mean, look, like they really need to put something there. So I don't know how much Reinsdorf's going to be on the hook for. Him and Wirtz paid for the United Center, but look, that was like 100 and that was way less. It was not in the billions. So for all of Jerry Reinsdorf's shortcomings, he does know how to get real estate deals done. So
Yeah.
I think I think it's going to be a major story. I think it's going to be cool if it happens. You're looking at 2020, like by the 2029 season probably, and it seems like a long time from now, but it's really not that far away.
Yeah, no, that's 4 seasons from now, essentially. So, 24, 25, 26, 27. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I guess it would be 5 seasons from now.
It would be 5, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, that's it's coming up quick. It's gonna come up quicker than certainly than you think. So
For sure. And I like guaranteed rate field. Like I live in New Lenox, like I can get there super quick from the south suburbs. I pull in, I drive a lot. You walk right up to the park. I like the Cork and Carry. Like like I love that place. But I understand like the feasibility of it, and like I've never lived north of the ballpark or just like in the northern burbs, and it's horrible supposedly. So like I've never had that problem, but I understand. And look, like Jerry Reinsdorf has like kind of a legacy to leave, right? I mean, he's not a well liked owner, and he shouldn't be. I mean, 40 years of ownership, it's like 6 playoff appearances, right? I mean, it's just not good enough. And he hasn't been good as a baseball owner. But again, all these people are just essentially like billionaire landlords. Like they've made all of their money off real estate. So, I'm pretty optimistic that this gets done actually. I don't know what the finer details of that look like, but I don't think this is just like one of those stories like Waukegan being interested in the Bears or something far-fetched like that the sports radio shows are like forced to spend a segment on. I think this is pretty realistic, and I think it'll be pretty cool. It'll be, if they do it right, it could be what a lot of people have been asking for a long time.
yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, there are still going to be a bunch of hurdles for people to get over, but I think that even moving it up that far, you're putting it closer to one of the main train stations in the city, and it's basically right across the street from another one. So I mean, you're more or less at least eliminating a bunch of the driving traffic, and parking issues by doing that. Um, I mean, there's there are some logistics issues, but I don't think it's anything that's any worse than what people are dealing with right now, and it's not going to be any more costly than it is right now. It's just that you might have to rely on public transportation as opposed to personal. So
Yeah, so I don't know what the residents have like currently been paying, but Bruce Levine made a statement about like how taxpayers wouldn't be paying more than they're paying now. So I don't know if that's like, whatever people were paying for the first stadium agreement, they're just going to keep paying that amount for like longer. I don't really know, but he made it like a public statement that, like I'm sure they're going to need public funding, and I know that's like a taboo thing to talk about that we don't really
yeah,
need to get into, but he really made it sound like it wouldn't be this huge burden on the taxpayers, which is good because I think that's everybody's first question. It's like, yeah, great, a new Sox park, you pay for it, right? Which
Yeah.
I completely understand. And then another thing I just wanted to bring up quickly. I don't think you guys got into it because I think it was Friday. What did you make of the comments? I think it's Nicole Lee. She's the alderman, um, like currently in Sox Parks district. Like she's the
Mm-hmm.
Bridgeport alderman,
Yeah.
and she kind of seemed like, to me, it was like, well, this is a fait accompli. Like, I'd rather have him stay in the city. So, like, this is fine type of thing. It wasn't like a typical alderman pushback, like, I have to keep this team in Bridgeport kind of thing. I was taken a little bit aback.
I've gotten the feeling from her from a couple of years now. People had broached the subject before of kind of like building up the outside of the park, and from what I remember, and I might be misremembering. Somebody feel free to correct me at some point. But I seem to have the feeling that she was opposed to building up around the ballpark, and it doesn't surprise me that she's like, okay, cool. Now that's not going to be my headache anymore. Go ahead and get it out of here. Is kind of like probably how she's feeling about it. Despite the amount of revenue that it might generate, I don't think that it's necessarily enough for her to worry about, or it's one less thing for her to stress about, I guess.
Yeah, you would think though that, like, if the team's not there, right? Like they've mentioned the Chicago Fire or whatever, something,
Yeah.
right? But like all that parking lot space could be used for something, right? So that has to kind of be on their mind, you would think. Like you're not just going to have like all these empty parking lots sitting there, which is one of the pushbacks about the 78 location. I mean, you're going to have a parking structure that's super high for people to park in because there's just not, it's not going to be like it currently is because there's really not enough space for that.
Yeah.
So, going to be a lot of people partying on the train together, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. This week, I guess we'll go ahead and get into the actual White Sox news, and get to the player development side of things. The White Sox just released their 2024 player development team, and there's quite a few changes. Not anything super huge, but I mean there are definitely some interesting changes. I'll just go ahead and kick the ball to you, and guess let you start here. What's the most intriguing thing for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know about necessarily like intriguing. I want to hear Alan Zinter, so he's the new hitting coordinator. We had Andy Barquette on a couple times. I know you've talked to Andy in the past. I really kind of liked the message that he was preaching. So, I hope it's not a ton different. I was kind of hoping that the White Sox were going to have somebody come in on the hitting side that was like your hitting Brian Bannister. And they didn't really do that. They have a traditional hitting coach on the big league team, and then they have Alan Zinter, who's had some big league experience, and it seems mostly an old school hitting type approach. But I don't know. I mean, I've kind of liked the things that Marcus Timms has had to say. If you ignore like all the little slap and dash guys that we've acquired, I do like what he's preached in other spots. So that's interesting to me. Like I'd like to hear him speak. I'd like to talk to him and just kind of see. And then, there are hitting coaches like throughout the organization. So that was a big change. Matt Zaleski moves into the pitching coordinator role that Efford Tieford vacated. So that seems pretty similar like on the pitching side. But I guess like I don't really care that much like as long as like Brian Bannister I think is running the pitching department essentially. And then, Ethan Katz has a lot of say with the big league team. Like once we get around to draft time and like Ethan Katz watches draft prospects and he has a say in any pitcher that comes in. So I kind of feel like that's a two-headed monster, and Matt Zaleski and like all the guys underneath him, Donnie Veal and others are probably just kind of falling in line under Bannister there. So there I know there were some interesting departures that you might want to get into. I think Sergio Santos is interesting, former White Sox closer, was managing in the Mets organization. He's rejoined the White Sox in this coaching capacity. He will be the manager at Double A Birmingham. And then other than that, like some of the, I think some of the lower levels, it seemed like kind of stayed the same, which
Yeah,
I was a little bit surprised about. But
I was as well.
and then there's help for Justin Jershely in Charlotte with the veteran Pat Listash, and a new pitching coach with extensive experience in the Tampa Bay Rays organization, a local guy.
R.C. Lichtenstein. From UIC, he pitched at UIC. They started his career at UIC as the pitching coach there, and has all worked with the Brewers and Devil Rays, as you said. So it's interesting, I think that with the fact that the way that they restructured their pitching coordinators for the minor leagues, with Zaleski taking over and kind of keeping the same, keeping one of the assistants and then bringing on, the bullpen coach from Chicago, to also be a pitching coordinator now. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in it. Obviously you've got Bannister running the whole show, so I'm kind of curious to see if anything kind of changes or if it's just kind of status quo. Obviously the roster in Charlotte is going to be a little bit more complete, so I don't think that it's necessarily, going to. It can't look like it has the last couple of years, just simply because the amount of depth that they should have, even if it's just guys that are getting ready to go back to Chicago for an injury or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to have the issue with having two starting pitchers on your roster in Charlotte this year. Just
No.
because, it is one thing. Like, they have amassed quite a bit of depth. Now, are any of the guys going to be big league number 3 or number 4 starters, like, for the long term? I don't know. Hopefully, right? That's, like, if you have 10 pitching prospects, hopefully you end up with 2, I think is the old adage, right? But at least you have players that can start for you. And we'll get into the whole conversation on this show about what we should take away from the numbers at Charlotte, because that place is brutal, at least for the pitchers. So and hopefully Lichtenstein has a lot of experience. It'll be a different voice than what some of those guys were dealing with, but it is going to be just quite a different roster. One other thing that I noticed: traditional bench coach at each level. It hasn't been that way for a while, right? So I wonder, like, Chris Getz was running the minor leagues. Like, is this, like a Paul Janish decision? Is it, something that Josh Barfield kind of told Chris Getz, hey, you need bench coaches? Did Chris Getz always want bench coaches and Kenny and Rick didn't care? Like that, stuff like that is interesting to me, because they've always just kind of had like some guy that was like helping with the hitting was also doing like bench coach responsibilities for years, and it's been a little bit different than how other teams have handled their minor league teams.
Yeah, that should be interesting. Also, since you brought up Rick and Kenny, I would like to make one thing that I saw on that list compared to last year. There is no KW Jr. on the list any longer, and that saga is apparently now over.
It seems like it. He's on the website still. So, I don't know if me and Mike talked about this on the show. Did I talk about this on the show? So I had heard last year that he like vacated that assistant role like midway through the year, and he was basically just like Ken Williams' assistant essentially.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that is like this conspiracy theory that like Chris Getz fired him and like that, whatever, good, whatever, fine. But yeah, like I think whenever they get around to updating the team website, I don't expect Kenny Williams Jr.'s name to be on it anywhere. So that's so there is no assistant director of player development right now. Paul Janish comes over from Rice University. I don't really know much about him other than, he's another, big league infielder that spent a lot of time in the majors. I think he kind of knows what it takes to get there, but he also understands some struggles, very similarly to Josh Barfield and Chris Getz. I think a lot of these guys are very similar in that regard. He was on with Bruce Levine and David Haw this past weekend. Didn't say anything too crazy. Sounded like a PD director. So, we'll see. It's just one of those things. Like, I'm curious to see if there's anything noteworthy that's different. I will say one thing I've heard under Chris Getz so far he has program heads and he lets the program heads do their jobs. It wasn't always that way, right? So, we'll talk a lot about Chris Getz and whether or not he was the right hire. And, I think both of us wanted them to go outside, but that doesn't mean that Chris Getz can't be good at this. And I think, that's going to be like a common theme for me. And I do know that lots of people in that organization, players included, are happy that it's a former player in charge. Does it have to be? No, I don't think it's a requirement for the job. But there are a lot of people who feel like their needs have been met or at least listened to because there's somebody up in that chair that like understands what they've gone through or what they're going through.
Yeah, if I will throw this out there for the listeners, if you have not, and you are curious about Paul Janish and you want to see kind of like like his ideas on things and kind of how personality-wise he is. He did have his own podcast for a while on the Reds, and it's kind of it's an interesting listen, and hearing things that they talked about on that side of things. I thought that was a fairly entertaining kind of look into Major League Baseball. Even if it is from a couple of guys that didn't have a huge amount of service time and whatever, but it was fairly good. Yeah. Also, something else I'd like to point out is a lot of people, as soon as I posted news about Paul Janish getting hired, they looked at his record at Rice, and a lot of people freaked out saying, "Oh, his record over there is terrible." One thing that you kind of have to look at is that his record. If you look at what happened at Rice right when he got hired, was because a long time Hall of Fame college baseball coach was kind of forced out of Rice. And so all of the people that were committed to go to Rice, massive clean out of a bunch of their top, recruits. So he was kind of left with less than talent, forced to try and win with that. So,
yeah. I will say, too, Paul Janish was I think he's one of the only guys where there wasn't like a tie right away, right? You're like, well, how do they know? How does Chris Getz know Paul Janish? And you're searching Wikipedia and you're like, well, I don't think they ever crossed paths. Paul Janish said that, they had played against each other a bunch of times and like struck up a relationship and whatever. Like, and I know that Josh Barfield had kind of, I think, tried to hire Paul Janish a couple of times with the Diamondbacks, but wasn't necessarily in a hiring role with the Diamondbacks, and now he is. He's the number 2 in charge of the Chicago White Sox. So he's here. They think he's going to do a good job, and we'll see. I'm sure we'll talk about him quite a bit on the Future Sox podcast.
Yeah. All right. So seems like a good as time as any. This
talk
week,
about some players. Yeah.
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 This week, the Baseball America came out with their top 30, and we should discuss that because there's a bunch of little interesting things going on here. Do you want me to bring it up on the screen?
Yeah, I think you could flash it for anybody that's paying attention that wants to go back and watch later. I will say it's the prospect handbook. It's a lot of new players. In the Baseball America handbook, they have the White Sox listed as the 18th overall system. Sounds about right. It's the back end of the middle, I think, middle of the pack. They could make a Dylan Cease trade and, move closer to 10, kind of. That's how close some of these things are. But they're definitely not at the bottom because when you have 2 top 40-ish prospects in baseball and one of them's firmly top 15, things start to look a lot better. And look, there are some guys with upside. I mean, like Nick Nastrini can be pretty good, and some of these other guys at the top. So
there is the top 10. Colson Montgomery, Noah Schultz on the top of that list. Let's run through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be on the top of most lists, right? I mean, those guys are, I think, both going to be pretty consensus, like top 40-ish prospects in baseball. Colson Montgomery keeps rising. I think he'll be top 10 by midseason once some of these guys graduate. And, I think Edgar Caro bumped down to 5 for Baseball America. I think, who knows, 3, 4, 5, him and Nick Nastrini and Brian Ramos. I think all these guys are going to be right in that range. It's not really that important who's where, but I think that's kind of how that goes. Jake Eater, like, I'm a fan of. He actually has to show results at some point, though. It's a great arm, but,
Mm-hmm.
I know they were working on some stuff with him mechanically. He could really take off and be like a number 3 starter, or he could like be in the bullpen or be nothing. So it's just the gamble that you make there. And then, I think the rest is pretty straightforward. Mena, Pallett, Cannon, I think those guys are right in range toward the back end. And, one thing I'll mention, Baseball America has the White Sox has the 18th overall system. I think right there, like back end of the middle of the pack, sounds about right. They could move up a little bit more if they trade Dylan Cease, but a lot better than what it was at this time last year, where they were a back third farm system, I would say. Any major takeaways for you, just like in the top 10? I know I have some in the teens, but you can go first, just if you noticed anything that kind of you raise your eyebrows at or anything.
About the only thing that I kind of have questions on. I feel like every single one of those guys belongs up in that area. The only one that I have questions on is Jacob Gonzalez. Simply because, when we saw him last year, he was probably gassed. After a very, very long time, Team USA, college season, back to Team USA and draft prep, and then rookie ball, and then in Kannapolis. So, I still don't think that we've seen what he is yet. I don't feel that, the results that happen in Kannapolis are a fair assessment of what he is. So I'm waiting to get eyes on him again this year. That's pretty much
and I think that's fair. And look, I never really look too far into draft year stats of college guys, especially. He did get on base. He didn't impact the baseball, which is an issue. And if you've seen the swing, like the swing is kind of rough. And he hit a lot of homers with aluminum bats in college. And like, is he going to be the 20 homer infielder? I don't know, right? So, like, I think the big thing for him is like there's some defensive questions because of his speed, but like if he's a shortstop, he's a prospect. He hits left-handed. He's going to get on base. And we'll see, right? Like if that guy has to move to second or third, specifically third, I mean, the bat's going to have to play a little bit better. So, look, I don't think Jacob Gonzalez is the lost cause that everybody else thinks he is. It's not the pick that I would have made. But he's also, I've seen some comments that he's, like a total bust already. I mean, it's just way too early to think about that. I'm curious to see whether they start him at Kannapolis or Winston, though. But we'll have those conversations.
One question though, were you surprised? I know that you said that you mentioned that Caro dropped down to 5. Obviously, that's because Ramos kind of slipped in there, and you thought that Edgar Caro would be top 100 possibly. So, do you think that by de facto that Ramos will also be up in that area? Or do you think that Caro will jump him into the top 100 and Ramos won't be up there?
Right. Well, so for Baseball America, like I think they wrote something after with 15 just missed, and Brian Ramos and Nick Nastrini were both on it. So, yeah, they firmly have Caro at 5. I think Caro might be on the list at Pipeline. I think when I do my personal list, I'd keep him 3. I don't really want to penalize him for what the Angels did, like moving him to Double-A as a 20-year-old, because that's what Artie Moreno does. And look, it is a big, at least 150-point OPS drop. I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I mean, he was playing in Double-A as a 20-year-old last year. It seems like he's going to stay behind the plate. He's a switch hitter. So, I think I wouldn't argue with any of those guys 3, 4, 5. If you wanted Jake Eater 3, I wouldn't really quibble with that either. So that's seems pretty okay with me. And then obviously like 11 through 20, the thing I guess that I noticed right away was George Wolkow at 12. I thought right away like, ooh, that's a little bit high, but like then thinking about it, he is probably the highest upside position player in the system that's not one of those top guys. So that makes some sense to me. The other way, Sean Burke, I was a little surprised up at 13. I wouldn't be surprised if some outlets have him in the 20s just because of some of the injuries and the reliever risk and just issues there. I don't know how he is health wise. And then Grant Taylor. Grant Taylor, I'm a big fan. It was a second round pick. It was slot value in the second round, but I mean, last year on the Cape, he looked like a potential top 20, top 25 pick. There were people that referenced him kind of going toe to toe with Paul Skeens. Not that he's as good as Paul Skeens, but if you saw him on back to back nights with LSU, this was another guy that looked like a clear first rounder. He had Tommy John, didn't pitch last year. So I'm very curious to see how they handle Grant Taylor, how quickly he can pitch, where they put him, how many innings he gets, things like that. Probably very similar to how Peyton Pallette was handled last year.
Yeah, and I mean, like the similarities between I'm hoping for similarities with Grant Taylor for Tanner McDougall as well, where he got some decent amount of innings in this year, and hoping that that's kind of the path that Grant Taylor can follow as well. Same with Pallette as well. Right after TJ, get him back out there. Hopefully he gets, like a decent amount of innings in. Even if, like you saw with Tanner McDougall, like kind of in the mid-season, you saw him kind of have a dead arm period for a little while where he was, kind of gassed and things weren't coming along as well as you were hoping. But then on his last outing of the year, he just absolutely shoved, and it'd be nice to see, Grant Taylor come out and show some of that nasty stuff.
So Tanner McDougall's a large person.
He is.
He is a big boy, and he, pretty good. And you hear all the reports, and I know some guys that knew him out in Vegas, and they were, very happy that he turned pro and got the money. He's interesting. I think we could see Tanner McDougall at AA, I think. Another interesting one on this list, just Jordan Leisure. What do you think, Ian, about ranking relievers? I've always kind of debated this with, my colleagues here at FutureSox. I don't really rank relievers unless there's high leverage upside. And Jordan Leisure definitely has that. So I don't mind him middle of the pack here, but I definitely understand if you said, oh, he's a reliever, he should be in the 20s type thing, just because of the value proposition, right? I think he's a no doubt big leaguer, but they fizzle out fast, and relievers are just very fickle.
Yeah, I kind of I see it from both sides here, but I do think that because there is closer potential there, that that's a good reason why you could see him in that middle of the pack and not towards the back end. I think that if you don't see, if he does make a major league debut, shortly, which I kind of think he will, as long as he stays up there, we won't have to worry about this again. But if he does come back to the minors at any point, I could see him dropping out entirely because he'll be a year older by the time it goes for a major re-rank. So I don't know. Personally, I don't mind when a reliever has very high upside and looks like he's going to be very useful in a major league bullpen. I'm perfectly fine with ranking him, but I probably like you said, I wouldn't go top 10 with it, just because of the minimal amount of usage that you're going to get, regardless of whether he's great or not. It's unless it's Josh Hader coming out, I could see why you would hold off on trying to give him a major ranking. So let's go ahead and move to 21 through 30, and I think this is where there's going to be some thoughts on major re-ranking of sorts, or wanting to anyway.
Yeah, so two that are super interesting for me, one that I expected, one that I wasn't sure on. So Javier Mogollon hit 10 homers in the DSL this year out of Venezuela. He's going to rank everywhere from what I've kind of gathered. He'll be on the pipeline list. Will be on ours. He was their best performer in their international class last year, and he only signed for $75K. I mean, he's a smaller probably second base profile, but he can really hit. And, you know, it looks like they have a potential 50 on him. So that's interesting. And then Matthias Lacombe. So, you know, I know people have heard me talk about the draft in the past, right? Matthias Lacombe's a 12th rounder, but Matthias Lacombe signed for $450,000 in round 12, which probably made him their fifth or sixth highest bonus.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting guy. I mean, he's from France. He's pitched a lot in relief, but they see him as a starter. Very curious to see just like how quickly he can move through the system, you know, where they start him, how many innings he can throw, same type of thing. But really interesting arm, and having him kind of ranked before he's done much. I like the aggression with that. But usually, you know, signing for $450,000 on day 3 is usually, you know, a sign that they think highly of a guy.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious on that one. Trying to remember if it was him or Christian Upper that didn't pitch in Arizona. Do you remember which one it was? I can't remember.
It was Lacombe. So Opper pitched, and he
Okay.
looked really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
In short outings. I mean, he would come in and punch out 3 guys, and Opper's nasty from the left side. But there are some reliever questions. You know, the repertoire's not super developed, but he's a super athletic former basketball player, Wisconsin kid. You know, that ended up going to junior college for a year. I mean, it's pretty funny. Like, this is like a refresher now, but apparently the White Sox were gonna take him in the 11th round 2 years ago. They had a deal to take him, and then the A's took him, and they didn't sign him, which is very strange. And then the White Sox ended up with Jacob Burke, who's also on the list. So that was a kind of an interesting Jim Callis story on the day of last year's draft.
Yeah, and you know, I'm happy that we got Jacob Burke too. So, all right, so I'm gonna kind of, you know, we had a quick talk about this pre-stream. I want to go ahead and bring this up and bring this up for everybody else. Braden Shumake is at 26, and basically since he was in high A, I haven't seen anything from him offensively. Obviously, the glove is very good, but offensively, we haven't seen a whole lot for him. And he's, I believe, he's 26 years old, and they slotted him in at 26. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wrote down my 30. I'm not going to release it yet, but he was not on mine. I don't know. Like, I don't really get it. He's on the 40 man. I mean, there's pedigree obviously because he was a first rounder, and you know the Braves have done a pretty good job drafting college position players, but he just hasn't hit, right? Like, is he a big leaguer? Probably, right? But he's not. I don't think he's a big league regular. So, I mean, if you think that it's a definite utility guy, I think that it's tough to rank definite utility guys in a middle of the pack system, right? I mean, you know, when the book comes out and some of these other places and Kansas City and the Angels and the Astros are, you know, your worst systems in baseball. Like, I kind of feel like a Braden Shumake probably ranks in those systems.
At
But
around 26, probably.
Yeah, like for all of the White Sox shortcomings, I think the system's a little bit better than this right now, to the point where I didn't really expect to see his name.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same. And if you look at the Baseball America, if you look at the depth chart from them, one guy that was one slot lower than Schweitzer on that was Mason Adams. And if I had my way, I would absolutely include him in the top 30, and I would definitely remove Shumake at least to make space for him. That's kind of where I'm at. But, I mean, obviously, you know, like you said, we're going to go ahead and do our own top 30 and everything here coming up in the future. So, see how that goes.
Yeah, and one thing we're gonna do, so we can preview that a little bit. One thing I can say here, I'm planning on the first week in March for our top 30 and our, you know, our just missed and things along those lines. We got a lot of people voting this year. We will release individual top 30s for Patreon subscribers. So that's, you know, one thing that's always kind of interesting. And what we've done in the past here, like, I've used kind of a prospect point system similar to MLB pipeline, right? So if you think about 6 of us rank, if all of us have Colson Montgomery at 1, he gets 30 prospect points from each of us. So it kind of goes like that, and then we can tweak the list if we think somebody belongs somewhere else. But that's the gist of kind of how we do it. So yeah, I'm really curious to see how some of this goes. And look, I came up with 50 names that are at least interesting. So we should have 20 just missed as well. So there's been the past couple of years, it was really tough to get to 40, 42, 43 names sometimes.
Yeah, I feel that I could definitely come up with a good 45 at least. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Should be a good time. You can find that information when it does come out. You can find it on FutureSox.net, which is where you can find all of our written content. You can find this podcast. You can also find this podcast on any of your favorite podcast purveyors. At Daily White Sox, my name is Ian Eskridge. James Fox at James Fox 917. We will be back again on Sunday next week. We're trying to keep this time slot all the time, so look out for us there. You can find this stream on YouTube and also up on our Twitch videos spot. Thank you so much for coming in and hanging out tonight and listening. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And we will catch you guys next week. Thank you very much. Have a great night.